Former senator and World War II veteran Bob Dole is lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda. He died on Sunday at the age of 98 after battling stage 4 lung cancer. Dole spent nearly 3 decades on Capitol Hill and served as the Senate Republican leader for more than a decade. He ran for president 3 times but was ultimately unsuccessful. Dole was awarded 2 Purple Hearts from his service in the war, in which he was very badly wounded. Tributes have poured in from across the country. Congressional leaders from both sides of the aisle paid tribute to Dole at the ceremony. President Biden was one of the speakers who reflected on Bob Dole's legacy.
Robert Joseph Dole. He belongs here, in this place, in this temple of liberty. Bob Dole loved this Capitol. It's where he served the nation, shaped by the figures that surround us. Washington and Jefferson, who set us on our path. In a sentence, Bob belongs here. He, too, was a giant of our history. And that's not hyperbole, it's real. Of wit and grace, of principle and persistence, of courage and conviction.
The president ended his speech saying his friendship with Dole was real, and though they often disagreed, they found ways to work together. I want to bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Chris Van Cleve now. Hi, Chris. Of course, it is a great honor to lie in state. Can you tell us a little more about the ceremony?
Sure. It is an honor reserved for a select few. It dates to 1852, the first time a member of Congress or anyone was able to lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda. So this is a solemn and long-lasting honor that is bestowed upon a select few of America's leaders. The ceremony was smaller than it maybe would have otherwise been because of pandemic protocols, so it was limited to family, friends, members of Congress, distinguished guests only. And while there is a viewing going on, it is, again, only open to family, friends, and staff here to be able to pay their respects to Senator Dole as he lies in state tonight. President Biden, who served with Senator Dole for almost 25 years, said in his mind, Senator Dole belongs here in the Capitol, so it is fitting that he is spending one final night here. We heard from the Speaker of the House. We heard from the Senate Majority and Minority Leader, as well as the President. The ceremony was only about an hour, but there were certainly common themes. The ability for Senator Dole to get things done, to make things work, his patriotism, his perseverance, his ability to overcome setbacks and struggle, his humor, and this idea of finding bipartisanship through civility. Something that seems like a distant memory almost from how politics is working today.
I was going to say it's so refreshing to hear politicians from both sides of the aisle, praise a leader from another party. Tell us a little bit more about what some of the other lawmakers said, including Senate Minority Leader McConnell and Majority Leader Schumer, because, of course, Dole was a Republican, and he even endorsed former President Trump in 2016. But yet he is that rare sort of political figure that really did seem to transcend party lines. Do you think we see something similar in any of our leaders today?
Well, you see glimpses of bipartisanship up here, and there are still some friendships that cross the aisle. But, what was governing with civility and respect and humor seems to have given way often to rancor and discord. I mean, it's hard to think of a Twitter fight breaking out between Joe Biden and Bob Dole back when both were senators. It is a different time, for sure. Now, you had Republican leader, Senator Mitch McConnell, the minority leader, who is the longest-serving Republican leader, the only one who served longer than Bob Dole, in fact. He talked about Senator Dole's very first speech on the House floor after he was elected, marking 24 years from when he was to the day when he was wounded in World War II. And what Senator Dole chose to talk about that day, which he described as the task ahead is monumental, he was talking about helping Americans with disabilities. It would take years, decades, but he would be successful in passing the Americans with Disabilities Act. So that was one of the things that Mitch McConnell remarked on. He talked about how he built a brighter future for other people. That was a legacy of Senator Dole. Speaker Pelosi honed in on two things. The act worthy, something that was a motivating factor for Senator Dole, was to act worthy of American ideals. She said we all need to resolve to meet his challenge, to act worthy of those ideals. And there was much talk about a moment in 2018 when George Herbert Walker Bush, the 41st President of the United States, who was an opponent of Bob Dole's for the Republican nomination in 1988, a campaign that got a little nasty when Mr. Bush, when the president, was lying in state himself. There's a very memorable image of Bob Dole being helped to his feet out of his wheelchair so he could salute the former political rival as he held back emotion. That was a story that we've heard a lot today as well.
And of course, you know, his humor was rather famous among his colleagues. President Biden spoke a little bit about his friendship with Dole, as we mentioned, but even shared an anecdote about Senator Dole's sense of humor. Let's listen.
He did have great wit. They once asked him, why in God's name did he vote to continue to fund Amtrak? He said, because if he didn't, Biden would stay overnight and cause more trouble. I commuted every day. It's a true story. He was the deciding vote.
Very cute there. Chris, what else did President Biden share about their friendship sort of outside of the legislative realm?
Well, they date back to a time in the Senate where it was more Joe and Bob than the Democratic senator or the Democratic gentleman from Delaware and the Republican gentleman from Kansas. It was a different time. So that you had relationships that were built not only with folks in your own party, but across the aisle, friendships that endured. You might disagree during the day at work, but you'd still go to dinner after, or your families would be friends, those sorts of things. So they have a friendship that spans decades. And sometimes they were very ideologically opposed. There were other issues where they lined up. Senator Dole, when he was in the House, voted for the Civil Rights Act in the 60s, as well as the Voting Rights Act in the 1960s. Those were not guaranteed Republican votes. So he had a swing sometimes where he would find agreement, where he worked, for example, on child nutrition and food stamps. Again, not necessarily a Republican issue per se, but there certainly there was times where there was common ground. There were times where there was not, but there was always mutual respect, and that underlined their friendship. We know President Biden visited Senator Dole shortly after he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer earlier this year, shortly after the president was sworn into office. So this was a friendship that endured decades and decades.
Well, Chris Van Cleve in Washington, thank you so much for telling us about it. We appreciate it.
Sure thing.